change this. Let's see what it does.
Okay.
Is it
It's
better?
much better now. Yeah, it's much better now.
Okay, perfect. So as long as because I noticed that once my guest complained that there was an echo, and from my side I could not hear that. But at
Right.
the end, when the recording was done, then I could listen to that. So it was crap. Right? That's the reason I want to make sure that
You think your guests are lying to you?
I should trust my guest now.
Yeah, but we're good. The echo went away, so we're free and clear.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Let's get started. I would like to maybe ask you to just introduce a little bit about yourself. What you
Yeah.
do for a living. It's a typical question, but then it's just to get started about what are you into and why did you get into this particular sector?
Sure. Love to give you some information on that. So currently, I'm the Chief Technology Officer for an online lender in real estate. It's essentially a property tech or PropTech company. I've been CTOs for the last 10 years or so for various companies. And I usually join in the founding team of a startup. And then I go about building the technology and fundraising and all that stuff. So that's kind of what I've been doing most of the time. And the last 6, 7 years or so, I've been in fintech. I was doing small business lending, and now I'm in property tech, still lending, but real estate lending. And then prior to all this, I was obviously working for bigger companies earlier in my career, typically Fortune 500 companies. Started with writing code, obviously, and progressed to being a project manager, to a team lead of that sort. Worked a lot at Fortune 200 company because I was a consultant earlier in my career. So I got to see a lot. I got to travel a lot as well. But I really love just being sort of an entrepreneur or joining a team that is very entrepreneurial, right? Building stuff from the scratch and doing the fundraising and being in the spotlight once in a while, and that type of thing. So, so that's kind of my thing. Very pro LA ecosystem in the startup scene. And so I do a lot of stuff to help out my peers in tech in Los Angeles. But now, because of the pandemic, so I've kind of like been networking everywhere as well, and just talking to people on Zoom. That's been fun. So yeah, that's kind of my background in a nutshell.
And why fintech?
So that kind of goes back, I would say 6, 7 years ago. I was in this very interesting venture in Beijing. I don't know how much you know about the Chinese startup scene. So by this really rare opportunity that came up, I was asked to join this very early stage startup to start a company in Beijing in sort of the influencer media space. And so while I was there for about a year or so, obviously learning about the ecosystem over there, the whole tech scene is a story in itself. But just by being there, I witnessed sort of the rise of um, fintech in China. As a matter of fact, I think fintech in China is a lot more advanced compared to the US, and maybe to a certain extent to Europe as well. But when I was there, everything, I think as a consumer, I was able to transact a lot of the stuff right on my mobile device. And this was what circa 2014, 2013, right? And this is like the early days of WeChat, early days of Tencent. Like they were just coming up with these mobile apps that allows you to pay stuff on the phone. But I was there, like I was living on my mobile app pretty much all the time. And I was able to do things like pay for meals, uh, even buy a tiny insurance plan when I need to go for a weekend hike So everything was kind of revolving around your fintech apps. So that was kind of exciting when I saw that. And then after that experience, I came back to LA because my wife was like, "You're traveling too much. You can't be in China all the time." So I came back to LA. I was looking for something to do in fintech, right? And lo and behold, I met this two twin Latino brothers uh, that have a really interesting background. They both are graduates of Berkeley and Harvard and went to Wall Street. And they're so just like because they're twin, their career paths were also very alike. And but when I came across them, they were doing this sort of like online lending business for the Hispanic niche in the US. And so I was getting curious. I was like, oh, this sounds like a scam. I need to go and verify for myself. So I reached out on LinkedIn and just start having a conversation with Sean Salas, who is this 2015. And then that was kind of the start of my fintech career. I built this online lending company from the ground up. Uh, I think I probably is employee number 4 at this company. But anyway, the company right now is about 100 employees with several international offices, and they have, I think they're on their way to Series B. They're pretty big. But that's kind of like, that was kind of like my experience with sort of the fintech, and then during the pandemic, another opportunity kind of dropped on my lap, and that's the Dunmore Capital company that I just joined early this year. It's in real estate. It's exciting. There's a lot to do, and I know Camino is doing really well. And I was like, okay, maybe we should do something else and try something new. And so now I'm, in PropTech. So I went from fintech to PropTech. That's sort of been exciting for me.
Mhm. And we've seen a rapid evolution of fintech, over the past several years.
Yeah,
And
yes.
like you mentioned, like there's a different kind of energy in China. Like even when you said 2013 and 14,
Yeah.
there's a big evolution going on, on the sector. But now you compare that a particular period to where America is or the rest of the world is in terms
Yeah.
of evolution, in terms of fintech evolution. Where do you see the world is now?
Well, I think, um, if you will, I think that there's going to be a great acceleration coming up. I think there's going to be more and more of that. Uh, I wouldn't say like China is sort of setting examples for the world because they have their own ecosystem, right? And there's Great Wall of China, and that's kind of all censorship and it's all their own ecosystem. But the thing is, there's a lot of stuff happening in Europe, obviously in London and maybe parts of Germany. There's a sort of fintech hub going on over there, right? And they have open banking and all type of stuff that's happening. And I've seen during my time at Camino Financial as the online lender, there's been a lot of VC money going to South America. So countries like Mexico, Argentina, even El Salvador, like these are the company, they're doing crazy things like Bitso, where I was advising them. This Bitso is like a big online exchange in Mexico, one of the biggest in South America. And I think they're just Series C. I mean, they have a lot of transactions happening right now, and because of that, you know, it kind of blooms other companies in the ecosystem. There's a lot of lenders, a lot of VC money going there, and then like El Salvador, I think they just adopted Bitcoin as the legal tender in their country. So you can see like a lot of these things are happening, and that is sort of setting uh, us up a great automation space for a lot of these transactions that could happen right between all these different fintech entities. So I definitely see more of that coming. I definitely see also more people embracing, blockchain and crypto in their day-to-day. Of course, I understand like there's still a lot of myth and maybe some mistrust in some of these very cutting edge technologies in crypto and blockchain. But people are looking there for solutions now, especially in, I would say, in property tech or PropTech. It's a very new sort of space that kind of offshoot from fintech the last couple of years, and there's a lot of inefficiencies that's just waiting to be tackled, right? And if you were an early stage company that tap into it, you could make a good return, right? If you catch the right moment. That's what I think is happening around the world.
Indeed, like there's so much happening, and I had a chance to talk to one of the property tech founder a few months ago, and she's from Israel, and they are basically using this property as they're digitizing the property basically, so that's what they do.
Yeah.
And that's the first time I get to learn about that part. I didn't know before that, right? So I was like, whoa, can you do that, right? So you can buy
Yeah.
buy and sell properties now online, staying home, right? So
Yeah,
so
it's true.
yeah, then maybe can you explain a little bit of context there, for the people who
Yeah,
didn't really understand this part of the world?
right, of course. So there's a concept called tokenization
Yeah.
in blockchain, right? And the idea behind blockchain is everything is immutable and everything is available on this big online ledger, right? Where you could see all the transactions that have taken place. So one thing that people have been trying to do, or they've been applying in the security space, is they've been trying to tokenize, you know, certain mechanics of paying dividends or paying rent of that sort, right? And that's sort of been a very interesting angle for the real estate, because when you become sort of an investor, right, and you can sort of get property online by investing in these tokens, it means you have the right to potentially some rent or dividend that's coming out from this digital fund. And is wild, because before you have to go through a lot of manual process just to get ownership. But now you have fractionalized ownership, right, of a property. And so that makes the barrier to entry much lower, right? And that makes transacting more frictionless. And that also kind of removes a lot of the middleman, and it makes things cheaper, right? One of the challenges with real estate is there is a lot of players. You got the lawyers, you got the brokers, agents, and all types of people or companies in the middle that it's trying to take the percentage, right, of the transaction, and so it becomes very expensive. But when everything is done online through the concept of real estate tokens, then you then have the right to some of the great benefits of home ownership or property ownership, but without the hassle, right? So that's why I think it's moving a ton of things in the space right now. Like people are trying to go in and remove frictions or make things a lot more accessible for the ordinary folks that just want to have skin in the game.
Mhm. And isn't it really complicated to make people understand who are traditional, let's say, property buyers or sellers, like who are traditional of the nature? And how do you explain those folks, like, okay, this is what you're able to do now?
Yeah. So I think, first of all, I think real estate itself, it's a very opaque industry.
Yeah.
First of all, it's very conservative. A lot of people are still working their phones and just emails just to get things done. Okay, maybe even sometimes fax. This is crazy. When I started in this industry, we just got a fax from this title company or something, and this is just like insane. Like how I took a moment to process because it was insane. Like I've not seen an industry or companies in the industry use specs in a very long time, you know? So I think just to kind of, the first step is you need to go back to some of these people and make them understand, okay, these are the things that actually happens in real estate right now, you know, kind of break it down, explain the roles of these people, right? And then from there on, you talk about what are the ways to, you know, improve some of these inefficiencies that we see, right? So maybe it's this the title ownership, right, of a property. I mean, right now it's just on this piece of paper. In the US, you can go to a county clerk, right, and you just register, okay, this transaction change between these two people. But the thing is, there's not a lot of checks and balances in place. So there's obviously a ton of fraud. So things like blockchain is helpful because all the records are immutable, right? And once it's there, it's there. Like you can't change it. Everybody can see it, right? So you need to kind of go in and explain these concepts to people. So, oh, okay, I have a better alternative to just paper documents or paper records. And this is blockchain, and this is kind of how it works. And so I'm looking for more entrepreneurs out there, right, to really embrace some of these technologies and make them more accessible, easier to use, like with great UX, you know, user experience, so people can adopt it just like that, right? So there's a ton of these things that needs to happen, and unfortunately, you just kind of have to tackle one vertical at a time, and then make them work with each other, right? A lot of them right now they kind of work in silos, so and that's why you have the whole effects thing, right? It's impossible. People just feel comfortable, right, in their own space, and that's unfortunate. And so you need entrepreneurs, right, visionaries to see, okay, there are all these, you know, room to improve. How do we do it, right? Let's solve those problems.
Mhm, mhm. But I think it is not just the lack of education. Perhaps it could also be the limitations that we have in our current regulations, right? The way the
Yeah,
regulatory board is designed. Perhaps that is
yeah,
also a challenge.
yeah. I mean, I agree. I think one of the main themes, at least in prop tech, is there's been a lot of centralization of power, right? And namely the government or the big banks, they have control over everything. So if these are the people or the entities, right, that are setting the rules, it's going to be hard to change that because they govern a lot of aspect of our life on a day-to-day basis. So what I typically do in this sort of cases, you know, at least my recommendation would be you also need to have some grassroots effort, right? You need to get people together, right? Think about open source technology. That's kind of how they started. You know, technology today wasn't like what you see today. People now collaborate over GitHub, right, on open source projects. It used to be all proprietary, closed source. You know, look at Microsoft in its early days. It was Bill Gates and his MS-DOS, and it was all closed source. But that's not how software is today. And that was all because there was this band of open source visionary engineers that wanted to do things in a very decentralized manner, distributed way, right? So they came up with this technology, like Git is one, right? That came from the guy who did Linux, Linus Torvalds, and so and so we need more people that kind of think that way, right? So then you create this wonderful balance between the centralized and the decentralized, right? And you can't change it overnight. I admit, like there's you can't overthrow your government or banks, but they know if things are efficient, they're gonna give up something to gain something, right? So uh, I know governments open to do that. One great example is a Code for America, right? That was sort of a grassroots initiative that got started, I think early 2010, just by some people who love technology and who want to improve government, and then people just kind of did things for free, to help improve city infrastructure or build out these tiny apps, for civic purposes. So we need to do more of that thing, that sort of thing as well, right? In fintech. So then that way there's progression, right, over time. And that's what I believe. And I think we'll get there. It just takes a bit of effort, a bit of time right now.
Even though, there's so much going on, one thing that stood out for me in this conversation is we already are seeing, let's say, a parallel industry in terms of using a separate kind of currencies, which is of course like the crypto world. And it is already it's over $2 trillion industry. Yet it is, I mean, it is not mainstream yet, if we can say that, in terms of how, let's say, that the mainstream players are operating, even though underneath that, they already are investing a lot of money into this. Um, how do
That's
you
right.
how do you how do you see this being mainstream in a sense? We know that there is a currency now like Bitcoin, and it's more well known. But when it comes to other services, for example, loans, for example, mortgage payments or whatever, all the other smaller banking transactions that needs to happen on a regular basis, that still needs to happen. Maybe it's not ready yet. Do you think that DeFi space is still, emerging in that perspective?
Yeah, I'm a big believer in DeFi. I think the industry is ripe for this disruption. And what I think is going on right now is that obviously you have this great technology that's in place, but not a lot of people understand it. But a lot of people are seeing it, right? There's a lot of media coverage because of the Bitcoin prices that went up a lot, right, recently. And there's a lot of all these things. But the things, every time when there's rise, there's fall, right? And so people are afraid. People don't understand. And when people don't understand, they're less likely to adopt it. So, but the things, if you take a step back and you look at the history of blockchain and crypto, it's really, really short if you think about it, right? I mean, we're talking about early 2007, 2008. That's when Bitcoin got around, and then later on was Ethereum, and then the whole ICO thing that came up, right? And now NFTs, and so in the span of 10 plus years, you've got these revolutions going on, right? Some of them are mini revolutions, some of them are much bigger, right? Definitely. Also, some of them tend to be little bit fraudulent, right? And there's all these kind of hacking and coins being stolen and stuff like that. Yeah, it's the wild west for sure in the cyber world. But the thing is, right now, if you look around, just ask around your friends, how many people have hardware wallets, right? The number is a lot higher than just 2 years ago, right? People are slowly to recognize it. And if people can, start to see that in their day-to-day, then naturally they will become more comfortable when the option shows up. And it's just this, sometimes, all it takes is just one killer app that opens up and start accepting some type of crypto. And all of a sudden people would jump at it, right? And so one great example is in the early days of PayPal, right? PayPal, before PayPal, people didn't believe in how you could send money using email. But then boom, now it's an everyday thing. And it took 10 years. So it's just a matter of time, really. And I know in the gaming industry, that stuff is already very mature. Like people buy and sell, these gaming, items, right? This is a very, very standard thing now, right? All we need is for it to branch out to more different spaces, right? Real estate, of course, is only other end of the spectrum. It's this hard physical thing, right, that people live in, right? And it's a wonderful asset class. But to get there, you kind of have to progress, one, sort of one space at a time. And so all in all, I feel like it's very exciting, but it would take people to want to commit and then start embracing it, right? As a token of exchange, right, of value, right? So, yep. But I totally see that. It's definitely the DeFi stuff. It's some of it. It's sort of already happening. Some of it is starting to happen, but the big boys, right, the government, the banks, they're afraid and they're pushing back. So it's just gonna take a little bit of tweaking here and there, before people getting comfortable and open and accept that with open arms.
Yeah. Indeed, like there's so much perks to decentralizing a lot of services that otherwise is so centralized right now. Can you maybe paint a picture? Like, I don't know, maybe 5 years down the line, like everything is decentralized. Maybe can you paint a picture on how consumer will interact with technology?
Sure, of course. So I like to talk
It's a
about.
vague situation for you, but then you have to paint a picture now.
No, it's fine. It's fine. And I think about these all the time because I'm a prolific sci-fi reader and I love kind of dreaming about the future. So this is a thing I think about all the time. So actually, this question is spot on. So let me maybe explain this in the context of lending, because that's sort of the industry that I've been in for a long time, and I like it, and I live and breathe it. So 5 years down the line, right? You have this, consumer. Let's give it a name. So make it a persona, right? His name is Charles, right? Charles is, a 30-year-old, you know, I guess head of the household of a young family. He's been working obviously for 10 plus years since graduation from college, university. He loves to he would love to get a house and buy a new car, right? And he goes online or check out his mobile device, and he start looking for uh, potential properties. Let's start with a home. Like he wants to buy a home, right? And so, boom, he finds a home, and then he start to apply. And that application process is simple as pointing the website to his sort of a public credit profile on blockchain, which needs to be deciphered with his permission, right? His private key, so that this particular lender can see his history. And on this page, credit profile page on blockchain, it's all these things that he's done financially in the last 10 years, like for the lender to actually look at and review in order to assess his creditworthiness, right? And five days later, this person needs to get a new car, maybe it's a Tesla or whatever, and so the same process happens. That there's this instead of a, a very centralized credit bureau, you now have things that's available on blockchain that could be tapped into in order to assess people's creditworthiness. And then as soon as the lender is happy, which it's obviously done by algorithms, and it's just a matter of minutes. Once approval, he will have the necessary funding that he needs to purchase a home, or line of equity to purchase the home, or money to purchase a new vehicle, right? So and the thing is, he would never actually need to see this cash that show up in his bank account. A lot of these things would just transact seamlessly, right, between the lender and and the property, the original property owner, or the auto company, right? So essentially, you no longer have that much space anymore for these middlemen. They used to be there, jacking up the cost of transactions. So that's kind of the future that I see. 5 years down the road, and who knows what is the primary currency of exchange at that time. My gut feeling is it may not necessarily be US dollars per se anymore, but I do think like things like stablecoin could have a say in some of these things because of its relative stable valuation. Yeah, but the things, a lot of things have become more frictionless, cheaper to transact, and more convenience to everybody. So, and things will become more open as well. So that's what I see, honestly, and I think I encourage any entrepreneurs like who loves the space, to really start investing, right? Building these infrastructures in place so they can, work with each other, and just kind of, you know, build this very interesting visionary future that we're gonna all live in.
Yeah, interesting what you just said, because I also think like, a lot of things that you said can be a possibility, it could be true. Yeah. And are you an early adopter of any currencies? Like, did you invest yourself? Like, okay, this is where my money should go. Like, have you done that?
Of course, I think one of you know
Or
I
you
don't think
missed
you
out
can.
the opportunity like me.
Well, I let me put it that way. So I think um, I'm sort of a little bit more adventurous when compared to most people,
Okay.
and I was actually very fortunate to be in the tech space. And I remember the very first time I heard about blockchain. It was at a talk at Caltech, which is not too far from my home. I live close to Pasadena, and there was a talk. It was given by a panel, and one of the panelists was Brock Pierce. He's I think the founder of Bitcoin Foundation, and this is a long time ago, almost 10 years ago. And he was there talking about Bitcoin, Dogecoin, all that stuff. And obviously, I was curious, right? I listened when my ears perked up, but I didn't act right then because, of course, it was still relatively unknown um, in the mainstream tech space. But I think I would say, 4 or 5 years ago, I started investing in crypto because I feel like if I were a CTO of a company and especially in fintech, and I don't believe in it, I don't have skin in the game, how could that possibly make me a good CTO? I'm supposed to be a leader, right, of some tech organization. So, so if you're not adopting any of these, then you're like a little hypocrite. So I was like, all right, let me put some money in that, right, just to kind of learn. So I went through the hassle of setting up, my first wallet, and I tried different coins, right? There, started obviously with actually I started with Ethereum, and then I went to Bitcoin because when I got in, Ethereum was really big, and then now just like uh, I have holdings in like top 5 uh, coins by market cap, just kind of spread things up. I'm not early adopters of unknown coins. There's like close to 10,000 cryptocurrencies out there. I, some of these just like way out there for me, and so yeah, I try to put money where I think the technology is solid and the community is made up by some good people, people who have good moral ethics, and that's kind of my general investing philosophy when it comes to these cryptocurrencies. But it's interesting. Like when you start reading about the stories of some of these founders of these cryptocurrencies, it just goes to show there are people that want to change, but then at the same time, there are also people that have kind of went down this, a very different path, or sometimes paths that are not so not so well lit, and so they are peppered with conspiracy and all kinds of negative media coverage, which is unfortunate. But we got to keep going because I think I don't think in the history of mankind, people invent tools all the time, right? I mean, tools can be used for good purpose and bad purpose. So you just kind of have to keep going and just make sure, like, okay, you adopt something and you put it to good use and don't hurt anybody. And so that's kind of my philosophy around this.
Interesting. Even I tried it, but then I was a bit much later into the game, I would say. Ethereum to some extent, I was okay, I would say, but Bitcoin, I think I was already late, So that so that's okay for me.
Well, there's all these other coins, and they serve different purposes, and yeah, of course, like Bitcoin has by far the biggest market cap.
Yeah.
But then Ethereum has a lot of potential too, because it's been built with more modern technology. You can do smart contract a lot easier with Ethereum, and so I mean, just to kind of bring it back to real estate a little bit more, like right now, a lot of the real estate transactions, eventually ends up with some type of wire transfer, right, or ACH, which is, I would say, which is now still, I think today it's very it's possible to be compromised with some type of fraud, right? It happens all the time. The accountants or the CFOs of these companies, they get duped into wiring the money to the wrong party, to the bad actors. So, but if you were to adopt things like smart contract, when transaction happens, title change hands, boom, the money just goes right to the other party. So we just need to do, things of that sort, of that nature. Yeah, but in my mind, like personally, I feel like for crypto, I think there needs to be more applications like that's available for us on a day-to-day basis, because you can't buy that many things. You could buy some stuff available to sell using crypto, but it's not prevalent enough, right? So hopefully we can find more usage scenario for crypto down the road. And then for blockchain, I think this technology is great, and there's a lot of possible areas for application. And so now it really comes down to the leadership of some of these companies out there. Are they willing to adopt? Are they willing to use it to help make things more streamlined? Do they want to invest? Right? I mean, these are all big questions that leaders in tech have to answer. And I think that will make things a lot better in the future, right? If people start, seeing them like as a real thing, right? And people are more likely to adopt down the road. So yeah, so that's kind of my view on it.
You mentioned about some of the use cases, for example, the fraud in the real estate transactions. Is that some of the use cases that would going to be solved from the startup that you're working on right now, like the tech real estate startup, or there are some of the things that you hopefully want to solve in the future? Like how do you see this?
So I think in general, after 6 years in fintech, I think the fintech space has a few pillars. They are core, right, to any fintech businesses. You definitely need some type of AI machine learning, right? And you can apply that, to fighting fraud, uh, and just verifying people's, credibility. The second pillar I say is, the management of the portfolio itself, which is a lot of credit management, right? Risk management. So that's another pillar that needs to be considered when you're doing a fintech or property tech company, right? And then great user experience. You can't just build a fintech company but make things so difficult to comprehend or use, right? That's no good. You got to make it so that the common people can use it, right? And then last but not least, access to capital market, which is another great pillar that should not be ignored by any fintech companies. You need money to get money, basically. And that is making sure you have good relationships with capital market players, and maybe a lot of these things in the pillars that I just mentioned could have a very digital experience. So the primary thing about building fintech is you need to be able to integrate, right, and or come up with your own proprietary solution, which becomes your core competency, right, in order to capture the market. So you need to have some combination of those things in order to build a successful fintech company. Now, this company that I just joined earlier this year, we're in the space of lending, obviously, and I think lending in real estate still in its very infancy stage right now. There's the transactions usually are not, lightning fast. A lot of it is just it's just manual process with a little bit of automation. That's what a lot of players have done right now. But what I like to do, just to kind of address your question, is fraud is a big for a lot of fintech companies, right? And to effectively deal with that, a great application of machine learning is to actually fight fraud, because there's so much data, especially in fintech. We're talking, especially in real estate or property tech, that is, typically, if you're looking at property transactions, you could probably get terabytes of data from vendors just to kind of understand what exchange hands, in one day, right? But there's just so much data, and but some of that is actually fraud, right? And the only way you can actually pick it up is through some kind of pattern recognition, and machine learning is great use for it. So right now, my goal is try to build the business so that we integrate from best of the best in breed or best in class type of technology into the core of the business. And what we want to do is that we want to guarantee on our own is a great user experience from start to finish. Okay, so a lot of it will be very, very automated, but in an easy to understand fashion. I'm not opposed to including something like technology like blockchain in the future to help maybe with title transfer, tracking, or some other types of tokenization of real estate. I think those are wonderful things, but it'll be like way, way down in the future when we have like a sort of an R&D team that we can play around with some of these things that could be awesome in the application of technology in real estate. Yeah.
Interesting. There's a lot of things happening, and I think real estate is going to be, perhaps going to be the next sector where a lot of the technologies that you said are going to be implemented. So it's an interesting space.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's a big space. I mean, you think about it. globally, this market is valued at about 200 or 300 some trillion of valuation.
Yeah.
It's a huge. And the US is about, I think 10, 15, about 10 trillion in the US alone. And so this is by far the largest asset class. Like it's more than all the stocks and all that stuff combined. So if you think about that, and given it's still early, there's plenty of opportunities. Like one of the visions that we have is we want, for this current company, we want our users who are typically real estate investors, professional investors, like to manage the property and invest in properties as if they would, say, with Robinhood or one of these, really easy to use web apps or applications, right? And right now there is nothing like that out there, right? And why? Because it's a big industry that is resistant to change. There's a lot of regulation, right? The big boys right up there, they're still holding on to power. And I'm not too familiar with how how the real estate industry is in Europe, but my understanding, is that the government also plays a pivotal role in almost all real estate transactions. So, that's gotta change, because I think down the road, if you can't transact these things fast enough, it's just wasted opportunity, wasted time. On average, it takes about 4.3 months to buy a home, right, in the US, and 2.8 months to sell. This is a open stats that from Zillow, and this is inefficient. Like, look at how we trade stocks now. In microseconds, you can buy and sell stuff. Real estate needs to be that.
Yeah.
There's no reason why it couldn't be. Everything, it's just names, on a piece of paper. Come on, we can do better, right?
Yeah.
So, it we just need to kind of go there, right? Embrace it and go there.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. This is what I mentioned earlier before. Like I was talking to the entrepreneur from Israel, and she mentioned the similar things, right? And I asked her like, when can I buy a house staying at home? So something like that. I asked.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I know there are startups or companies, PropTech companies that are in LA. They've started like these like real estate funds, like they're available to invest online. So you can go in and pick properties and say you want to invest in this condo, and you have fractional ownership. But that one is no open. It's all proprietary. And also they have I don't want to name names, but at least my experience is like once you put money in a lot of these tech-enabled real estate funds, it's not easy to get your money back out. Like they say, okay, you have accrued some dividends but the money's still stuck in there, right? The only thing that's kind of more, that has that has that's a little bit has more freedom and more open is the public traded rates, REIT. Like these are like the funds that are, of course, like approved by SEC. And so that one you can openly trade, right, the stocks and holdings on your regular stock brokerage. And then you can get your dividend, like you can get monthly dividends, you can get quarterly dividends. Those are good, right? But these smaller company private funds still is very, very opaque. I'm still waiting to see like some company that can like open things up a little bit, and so that we can really invest in some of these things. But one thing just to kind of add to your point earlier on about your interaction with this Israeli entrepreneur, I think there's a lot of changes in real estate these days, not just with the concept of wanting to own something. I think the form in which we utilize the property is also changing. A lot of it is obviously accelerated by pandemic. people not necessarily always want to own a home. They want the space to do something, right? So that's why Airbnb is doing very well, right? They allow people to own, get into, to use the space for a particular purpose, right? For instance, this whole year, people want to go out, right? But they didn't want to venture out in the open. So they would rent just for a couple of days this nice house with a pool at this rather interesting location to enjoy the days, the time off, right? So, and then some people are using Airbnb to find sort of space to work, to be away from the little clutter home that they have, or they're often um, distracted by kids at home. So there's all these things that's happening, and I think um, going forward, there could be some very interesting opportunities, right, as we capitalize on some of these changes in the way we live and work, which I thought would be very interesting to pursue.
Some of the interesting cases that you mentioned,
Yeah,
especially about people being able to rent places, like going for vacation instead going for work, and because they have a confined space, they have limited freedom within their own space, and maybe they need a little bit of
yeah,
more room to just go and express themselves in terms of work, while they have their own privacy. So that could be an interesting sort of
yeah,
use case. Yeah.
yeah. And also, just so you know, like, I don't know about Europe, but in the US, the use of technology in prefabricated homes are becoming more prevalent now. So in America, there's this concept of building ADUs, right? And a lot of them right now have been built in the factories, in in modular pieces, and they just put it together once they ship it or to your home. And it's much better than the traditional way of building, right? Because there's quality control, right? And it's obviously less hassle, quicker turnaround time. So there's also that's also another opportunity that I think is very, very interesting in the prop tech space.
All right. Cho-Nan, thank you, man. There's a lot of interesting use cases we discussed, a lot of different topics. It was interesting
Of course.
conversation, really. I,
Yeah.
I get to
Thank you.
learn, yeah, I get to learn a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing your startup, creating products and something interesting UI. You talked a lot about UI, and I'm also a very big fan of having a usability in terms of how people interact
Yeah.
with the application. So I'm a big fan of that. So I'm
Yeah.
definitely looking forward to seeing your application in the future, and hit me, whenever something is live. I would like to explore a little bit and learn from there.
For sure. Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me today. You've been a wonderful host. I loved chatting with you. I hope this is the beginning of the many talks that we'll have. I love to give you
Absolutely.
updates all the time about the space I'm in. I'm in general, like, crazy about entrepreneurship. So, anytime, hit me up if you need something or want to learn about something new. Let me know.